There is a pattern in human history, a terrifying, predictable pattern that signals the end of every great empire. It's not a pattern of invasion or natural disaster. It's a pattern of financial decay, a playbook of currency destruction executed by ruling elites to maintain power. The Roman Empire followed this pattern. At its peak, the Roman denarius was 95% pure silver. It was real money. It was trusted. But emperors, facing unpayable debts from endless wars and sprawling bureaucracy, found an easier way than taxation. They began to clip the coins, shaving silver from the edges. Then, they began to debase them. Nero, Trajan, Caracalla, each emperor secretly mixed in cheaper metals. By 250 AD, the denarius, once a symbol of global power, contained less than 5% silver. It was worthless. The result wasn't just inflation. It was the complete collapse of trust, the disintegration of the economy, and the fall of the most powerful empire the world had ever seen. They didn't default on their debts. They devalued them into oblivion, and in the process, they destroyed their society. That exact pattern is happening again. Right now, in the United States. The United States government is currently facing $37 trillion in debt, a number so large it's incomprehensible. It is 132% of the entire nation's economic output. The annual interest payment alone is $1.2 trillion, more than the entire defense budget. Everyone in power knows the mathematical reality. This debt is unpayable. It cannot be paid back through taxes. It cannot be outgrown. It cannot be cut. So, here is the secret that nobody is telling you. They are not planning to pay it back. They are planning to erase it. Not through an open default, which would destroy their credibility. They are planning to erase it just like Rome did, through devaluation. A strategic, calculated, invisible theft of purchasing power from every single person holding US dollars. You are watching the most sophisticated, high-tech debt heist in human history. And their weapons of choice? The very assets people are turning to for safety, gold and Bitcoin. You are being told that these assets are a hedge against the system. The truth is, the system is planning to use them to execute the reset. They are building a parallel financial system, accumulating strategic reserves of these hard assets, all while preparing to revalue them at astronomical prices. And here's the part that must terrify you. When they revalue gold and Bitcoin upward by 10x or 20x, they are simultaneously and intentionally devaluing every dollar in your bank account downward by 90%. Every bond you hold, every pension plan you trust, every dollar in your 401k will evaporate in real terms. You are about to be legally and completely robbed, and most people will be cheering it on, thinking it's a return to sound money. They won't even realize what happened until it's far too late. In this documentary, I'm going to show you the actual mechanics. Not theory, not conspiracy, the playbook. First, I will show you the historical precedent. Not just Rome, but the American playbook, executed in 1933, proving this has been done before. Second, I will show you the actions the US government is taking right now, the executive orders being signed, the bills being introduced, the quiet accumulation of Bitcoin, and the manipulation of gold reserves. Finally, I will show you the timeline. When this happens, how fast it cascades, and what you absolutely must do to be on the right side of this wealth transfer. Because this isn't a 20-year problem. The final stages are already in motion, the pieces are on the board, and once they make the final move, there is no going back. To understand what is about to happen, you must first understand what did happen. Let me show you the playbook. Government debt is not like your debt. When you or I owe money, we have to pay it back with real value, with real labor. We have to work more, spend less, or sell assets. A government has a different tool, a secret weapon. They control the currency itself. And when you control the currency, you don't have to pay your debts. You simply redefine what the money is worth. You can make $37 trillion disappear without ever paying a dime. This isn't a theory. This is called a monetary reset. And it has been done before, right here in America. Let me show you the pattern. In 1933, the United States was suffocating. It was drowning in the debts of World War I and the crushing grip of the Great Depression. The entire system was insolvent. Deflation was vaporizing assets. The government was broke. They could not pay their debts. So, President Franklin Roosevelt did something radical. Something unthinkable. He didn't just print money. He revalued the entire monetary system. Overnight. Here is how the heist worked. At the time, the dollar was on the gold standard. The price was fixed. For 54 years, 1 ounce of gold was worth exactly $20.67. Your paper dollar was a literal claim check for a fixed amount of physical gold. It was real money. It was trusted. But the government's debts were also denominated in those trusted dollars, and they couldn't pay. So first, Roosevelt issued Executive Order 6102. He didn't ask, he commanded. It suddenly became illegal for any American citizen to own gold coins or bullion. You were declared a criminal in your own country for holding real money. You were forced to turn in your entire life savings in gold to the Federal Reserve. In exchange, they paid you the official price, $20.67 in paper dollars for every ounce. Most patriotic Americans complied. They dutifully traded their real, physical gold for paper promises. And then, after the government vaults were full, after the people had been disarmed of their financial protection, Roosevelt pulled the trigger. In 1934, he signed the Gold Reserve Act. He announced a new official price for gold, $35 an ounce. A 69% increase, instantly. Let's do the math. The government's gold reserves, which they had just confiscated from the people, were worth $4 billion at the old price. At the new price of $35, those exact same gold bars were suddenly worth $6.8 billion. They had manufactured $2.8 billion out of thin air. But the real magic was what happened to the debt. The government's massive debts were still priced in the old dollars. By devaluing the dollar by 40% against gold, the real value of that debt was erased. They paid their creditors back with dollars that were worth 40% less. The American people, the ones who had turned in their gold, were robbed. They were stuck holding paper money that had just lost 40% of its international purchasing power. It was the single greatest legal transfer of wealth. A sophisticated, state-sanctioned theft from the savings of the middle class to erase the unpayable debts of the elite. If this piece of hidden history, this absolute betrayal, makes your blood boil, press the like button. It's a small click, but it tells the algorithm that this truth needs to be seen. And I have to ask, did they teach you this in your history class? Let me know in the comments below. This is the real playbook, the history they conveniently leave out of the textbooks. If you are tired of the official narrative and want to understand the real mechanics of power, then subscribe to this channel. And make sure you hit that notification bell, because what I am about to show you next is not history, it is the news. What Roosevelt did in 1933 wasn't an anomaly, it was the dress rehearsal. And right now, the stage is being set for the final act. That was the playbook. Confiscation, revaluation, and the systematic, legal theft of generational wealth from an entire population. And what I am telling you today is that what happened in 1933 was not an anomaly, it was the dress rehearsal. Now, let me show you how they are preparing to run that exact same play again, right now, but on a scale that makes Roosevelt's heist look like petty theft. Look at the numbers today. The United States government is not just in debt. It is trapped by a $37 trillion black hole, a number so astronomical it has lost all meaning. That is 132% of everything America produces in an entire year. It is higher than any point in history, even exceeding the crisis levels of World War II. But the debt itself isn't the killer. The interest is. The annual interest payment on that debt, just the interest, not paying back a single dollar of the principal, is now $1.2 trillion. That is more than the entire defense budget. It is more than Medicare. It is a runaway train devouring 6% of the entire U.S. economy just to stay current. Everyone in Washington, everyone at the Federal Reserve, knows this is mathematically unpayable. They've run the models. They know the truth. They will stand on television and tell you they will cut spending. Cut what? The interest payments are now the fastest growing part of the budget. They will tell you they will raise taxes. On who? The middle class is already being crushed by inflation. You cannot tax your way out of a 132% debt to GDP spiral. They will tell you we can grow our way out. How? The economy is growing at 2 to 3% while the debt is growing exponentially faster. There is no scenario, none, where this $37 trillion debt is paid back in the traditional sense. It is impossible. So, there is only one option left. The only option. The same one Rome chose when its currency rotted from the inside out. The same one Franklin Roosevelt executed in 1933. Devaluation. But they have a critical problem. In the 21st century, they can't simply print $37 trillion to pay the debt. Not directly. Everyone would see it. The inflation spike would be immediate. The US dollar would collapse overnight, and global confidence, the very source of American power, would evaporate. It would be a public execution. No. They need a far more sophisticated method, a quieter method, a way to devalue the dollar without looking like they are devaluing the dollar. They need to make it look like smart policy, like innovation, like a return to stability. They need to perform open-heart surgery on the financial system, and they need you to believe it's just a routine checkup. Enter the new tools for the old heist, Bitcoin and gold. Let me show you what is happening right now, behind the curtain, in the first phase of this modern heist. On January 23rd, 2025, an executive order was signed establishing a strategic Bitcoin reserve. The order directs the U.S. Treasury to acquire and hold Bitcoin as a strategic national asset, similar to the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, but for the digital age. The public narrative? It's about positioning America as a leader in digital assets. It's about protecting innovation and not falling behind China. That is the story they are telling you. Here is the real reason. The U.S. government, through various seizures from criminal enterprises like Silk Road and Bitfinex, already holds approximately 210,000 Bitcoin. At today's price of, say, $100,000 per coin, that's $21 billion. It's a rounding error on a $37 trillion debt. It doesn't matter. But the executive order and the bills that followed it, like the one from Senator Cynthia Lummis, don't just say hold Bitcoin. They say acquire it. The target being floated is 1 million Bitcoin. But here is the key. They are not market buying it. That would be too obvious. It would spike the price. They are accumulating it, quietly, through seizures, through fines on crypto companies, perhaps even through state-sponsored mining operations. The goal isn't to buy Bitcoin at $100,000. The goal is to possess the Bitcoin before they change the price. They are accumulating this asset in the shadows, just as Roosevelt accumulated gold before the revaluation. The goal is to get the asset first and then change the price second. Now, let me show you the mechanics of the revaluation. This is the most critical part of the plan. Imagine it is 2028. The U.S. Treasury has quietly, through seizures, fines, and strategic back-channel acquisitions, secured its target of 1 million Bitcoin. The market has no idea of the true size of this government hoard. Then, the announcement comes. The president addresses the nation, perhaps during a manufactured debt ceiling crisis. He announces that to stabilize the U.S. dollar and restore confidence in the American financial system, the strategic Bitcoin reserve is now operational. And then, the key line. They announce that, for the purposes of the official U.S. balance sheet, Bitcoin will no longer be valued at the volatile market price. It will be given a strategic value, just as gold was in 1934. They declared the new strategic value of one Bitcoin is $1 million per coin. Not the $100,000 it was trading at. $1 million. A 10x revaluation, executed with the stroke of a pen. What does this do? Look at the government's books. Their 1 million Bitcoin, which they acquired for next to nothing, are now instantly worth $1 trillion on their balance sheet. They have just created $1 trillion in new assets out of thin air. But it's not just an accounting trick. The moment the United States government, the largest economy and military power on Earth, officially declares that it values Bitcoin at $1 million per coin for its own reserves, the global market reprices. Why? Because the government is now the largest whale. They have set the floor. They have signaled to the world that this is the new benchmark. The market price doesn't hit $1 million overnight, but it begins a catastrophic surge. $300,000, $500,000, $800,000, desperately trying to catch up to the new official price. And here is the part they will not tell you. This is the secret. While Bitcoin is skyrocketing to $1 million, what is happening to the value of the dollar? It is collapsing. If one Bitcoin, a digital asset, is suddenly worth $1 million, it simply means that one US dollar is now worth much, much less. It means the dollar has lost 90% of its value relative to this new strategic asset. The revaluation of Bitcoin upward is the devaluation of the dollar downward. They are the exact same event, just viewed from two different sides of the same coin. They will celebrate the strengthening of their balance sheet, while you, the dollar holder, are silently impoverished. But $1 trillion is not enough. $1 trillion is a bandage on a $37 trillion bullet wound. Bitcoin is the new, high-tech weapon, but it's not the main cannon. Now, let me show you the real weapon. The old, trusted, 5,000-year-old asset that is sitting in their vaults right now, waiting to be unleashed. This is the second part of the two-pronged strategy, gold. Bitcoin is the new weapon designed to capture the digital future. But gold is the heavy artillery. It's the weapon of history, the asset trusted by central banks for 5,000 years. And the U.S. government holds more of it than any nation on Earth. Officially, the United States Treasury holds 8,133 tons of physical gold. That's 261 million ounces of bullion, sitting in vaults like Fort Knox. At today's market price of, let's say, $2,000 $800 an ounce. That's worth approximately $731 billion, a massive number. But just like the $21 billion in Bitcoin, $731 billion is still just a drop in the ocean against a $37 trillion debt. It doesn't solve the problem. But this is where the real deception lies. This is the accounting fraud hidden in plain sight. That $731 billion market value is not what the government values its gold at. On the official books of the U.S. Treasury, that gold is valued at $42.22 per ounce. You heard me correctly, not $2,800, $42.22. That is the insane, archaic official statutory price set back in 1973, and they have never changed it. On their balance sheet, the U.S. gold reserve isn't worth $731 billion. It's worth a pathetic $11 billion. Why? Why would they hold an asset worth $731 billion and publicly claim it's worth only $11 billion? It's not incompetence. It is strategy. They are intentionally keeping the official price suppressed to give themselves an astronomical runway for revaluation. They have created a coiled spring, and they are just waiting for the right moment to release it. Now, let me show you what happens when they do. The 2027 crisis hits. The debt ceiling is catastrophic. The bond market is frozen. The president addresses the nation, announcing extraordinary measures to restore faith in the dollar. They announce a return to sound money, a new gold-backed dollar. But to do that, they must mark to market their gold reserves. And they don't just revalue it to the current market price of $2,800. No. Just like in 1934, they revalue it to the price they need it to be. They announce a new official price for U.S. gold reserves, $20,000 per ounce. Why $20,000? Because $20,000 is the number that makes the math work. At $20,000 per ounce, those 261 million ounces of gold are no longer worth $11 billion. They are suddenly worth $5.2 trillion on the government's balance sheet. They have just created $5.2 trillion of new asset value out of thin air, simply by changing one number in an accounting ledger. Now, combine the two prongs of the attack. $1 trillion from the Bitcoin revaluation. $5.2 trillion from the gold revaluation. Total new assets created $6.2 trillion. This $6.2 trillion doesn't pay off the $37 trillion debt. It doesn't need to. It offsets it. It recapitalizes the government's balance sheet. It makes the debt to GDP ratio look stable again. It makes the US government appear solvent. It saves the system from collapse. But here is the real magic, the real theft. The moment the US Treasury, the largest gold holder in the world, declares its gold is worth $20,000 an ounce, what happens to the global market price? It follows. It doesn't happen in 1 second, but it happens. The market reprices. Gold surges to $5,000, $8,000, $12,000, scrambling to meet the new official benchmark. And as gold skyrockets to $20,000 and Bitcoin skyrockets to $1 million, what is happening to the US dollar? It is being destroyed. Because if gold, which was $2,800, is now worth $20,000, it means the dollar has lost 85% of its value relative to gold. If Bitcoin, which was $100,000, is now worth $1 million, it means the dollar has lost 90% of its value relative to Bitcoin. The average American doesn't own gold. They don't own Bitcoin. They think in dollars. They think in groceries, in gasoline, in rent. And those prices are about to explode. Because when the dollar loses 85% of its value relative to hard assets, it loses 50, 60, perhaps 70% of its value relative to everything else. Everything you buy, every single day. Let me paint the picture of what this actually looks like for you. You have $100,000 in your 401k or your savings account. You've worked your entire life to build that nest egg. You feel not rich, but stable. You feel safe. Then, the revaluation happens. Over the next 3 years, the real inflation rate, not the fantasy number the government reports, but the real price of things you buy, hits 20% per year, then 30%. The price of food at the grocery store doubles. The cost of gasoline triples. Your rent, your property taxes, your utility bills, they all explode upward. Your $100,000 in savings, what does it buy now? It buys what $30,000 bought just 3 years prior. You have been robbed of 70% of your life savings. You didn't lose it. It was stolen from you. But the government's debt? It's still $37 trillion on paper. But in real terms, Adjusted for the hyperinflation they created, it's now only worth $13 trillion. They have just erased $24 trillion of their debt burden, not by paying it, but by devaluing the very currency it was measured in. They transferred $24 trillion in purchasing power from the middle class, from savers, from pensioners, directly to themselves. This is the strategy. Now, let me show you who wins and who gets destroyed. The winners are obvious. The US government. They erased $24 trillion in real debt without the political fallout of default. They maintain power. The political elite. They avoid the hard choices of cutting, spending, or raising taxes. The Federal Reserve. They maintain control of the monetary system. The wealthy and asset holders. Those who own real estate, stocks, and businesses see their assets inflate in nominal dollar terms. They preserve their wealth. Early holders of hard assets. Those who held gold and Bitcoin before the reset see their wealth multiply massively. And the losers? The middle class. People with savings in dollars. Your purchasing power evaporates. Retirees. Anyone on a fixed income or pension. Your income stays flat while prices triple. You are impoverished. Bondholders. Anyone holding U.S. Treasuries. You are repaid as promised, but in dollars that are worthless in real terms, you lose 70–80%. Workers. Wages never keep up with hyperinflation. Real wages collapse. Living standards plummet. The American dream. It dies. Because the currency that denominated that dream has been destroyed. This is not hyperbole. This is the mathematical outcome. This is the pattern. It's universal. Weimar Germany in the 1,920 seconds. They couldn't pay war reparations, so they printed. The mark collapsed, the middle class was destroyed, the government's debt erased. Argentina, Zimbabwe, Venezuela. The script is always the same. When a government's debt becomes unpayable, it always chooses to devalue the currency. It sacrifices the savers to save the state. The US is just following the same script with more sophisticated branding. They're not calling it money printing. They're calling it strategic reserve revaluation. They're not calling it debasement. They're calling it a gold-backed dollar restoration. But the outcome is identical. You lose. They win. So, here is what you must do. Not tomorrow, not next week. Now. Because once the revaluation is announced, it is too late. The transfer of wealth happens instantly. First, get out of dollar-denominated paper assets. Bonds are death. Government bonds, corporate bonds. You are holding a promise to be repaid in a currency they are actively trying to destroy. Sell them. Cash is death. Holding large amounts of dollars in savings or checking accounts is like holding a melting ice cube. Minimize cash to only 3 to 6 months of emergency expenses. Second, get into hard assets that cannot be printed. Gold, physical gold, not paper ETFs, physical coins or bars that you hold in your possession. Gold is the 5,000-year proven store of value that survives every monetary reset. Bitcoin. If you understand it, Bitcoin is the digital age gold. The government itself is planning to revalue it to $1 million. Get in before they do. Productive real estate, farmland, rental properties, assets that have intrinsic value and can generate income that rises with inflation. Third, get out of debt. This is counterintuitive. Won't debt be inflated away? Yes, if your income inflates with it, but it won't. Your wages will lag, but your credit card payments will not. Pay off high-interest debt immediately. A fixed-rate mortgage is the only good debt to hold, as that payment will be inflated away. Fourth, build skills and community. When currency fails, what matters is what you can do and who you know. Skills, medical, repair, food production become real currency. Your network, your community, your relationships, that is your real insurance. You might be thinking this sounds like a tinfoil hat conspiracy. Let me ask you, is the $37 trillion debt a conspiracy? It's a fact. Is the $1.2 trillion interest payment a conspiracy? It's a fact. Is it a mathematical reality that this cannot be paid? Yes. Is devaluation the only option? This is historical precedent. Did FDR do this in 1933? This is a fact. Are the bills and executive orders about a Bitcoin reserve real? Yes, they are visible policy. This is not conspiracy. This is policy. You just have to be willing to look. The world's central banks are preparing. They are buying gold at record rates. They see what's coming. The BRICS nations are building an alternative. They see what's coming. If governments and central banks are preparing, why aren't you? The choice is simple. You can be morally outraged and financially destroyed, or you can be morally aware and financially positioned. You can adapt, or you can get run over. Position yourself in hard assets. Preserve your wealth, or hold on to dollars. Trust the narrative, and watch your entire life's savings evaporate. The reset is coming. The only question is which side of it you will be on. If this analysis has opened your eyes, share it. The people you care about, those with savings, with retirement accounts, who trust the dollar, they need to know this. They need to know the $37 trillion deception is coming, and that the government is planning to use their purchasing power to pay for it. Position yourself now, while you still can.